I was listening to Anna Werner, and she heard a prayer, and it was someone, and it was a door opener. You know how Jesus says, "I'm the door"? What a lot of people don't understand, I don't know if it's a very good frozen picture there, Van. Let me fix it a little bit better here.
It's like a lead to take me.
That's about the best I can get, I think. But, you know, I'm seeing two things right here. The first thing I'm seeing right now, and then there's another thing I was seeing. I'm a seer of understanding. I'm not a seer of seer. A seer of things like her. I'm a person who sees and has the gift of understanding. And the word understanding is in the Bible more than faith and more than grace. And there's a guy on Sid Roth. He's the first person I ever noticed, because I never knew what kind of gift. I knew I had some sort of gift, but I didn't know what it was. But there's a guy on Sid Roth. Let's see if I can name, let me find it real quick here. This guy's name's Shane Wall. Let's find him real quick here. There he is. He talks about the gift of understanding. He has a seer gift. He sees angels, but he also has the gift of understanding, which is interesting. Now, his understanding, well, I better not talk about that. But the first thing I was seeing here is that Anna found she bumped into something, which wasn't by accident, that was a door opener. For example, in the Bible, Enoch was walking with God and all of a sudden he was taken. There's certain things that you do as Christians that are door openers, like Jesus is the door. So I'm totally convinced. I just woke up, so I'm coughing or fighting a little bit of sinus drainage. But there's certain things that are door openers. Jesus is the door. And really, that's all of what Christianity is about. All of Christianity is about accessing the kingdom, right? And Jesus, who's the door, is also the Word. So when you get a hold of a word and you fully believe it, for example, if you go to the revelation of a woman called Sandra Kennedy. Sandra Kennedy created a doorway to access the kingdom. And how did she do that? Well, she got a word from God, and the word said, "Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven." So she quoted this word over her mother, who was dying, pretty much close to death. She quoted this word over her mother, and as she quoted this word, of course, the word is a doorway. What's the word trying to do? It's trying to open a doorway to the kingdom, right? So she quoted the word over her mother for 5 hours. She said to her mother for 5 solid hours, she said, "Mom, there's no sickness in heaven." And she just quoted that word over and over and over again. And everything's about accessing a doorway. Like, for example, what Anna's doing here, she found a word that not only was a word, but it had a spirit connected to the word, which was an instant doorway opener. it created a doorway. You know, for example, when Jesus, the first thing that happened when Jesus died is the veil, the temple veil was torn, right? Boom. So before there was an access only by the priest totally covering themselves with the blood. They had to totally cover themselves with the blood. Then they had access kind of into the Holy of Holies. So everything about Christianity, when Jesus came, he would say, the kingdom of God has come unto you. But everything that follows from that is about getting into the doorway and going through the doorway. And then accessing whatever's in kingdom, whether it be revelation, whether it be healing, anything in the kingdom. We're trying to bring that to earth, because the opposite happened in Genesis when they sinned in Genesis. Now, there's a lot of people don't know this stuff. For example, when I was praying about 40 years ago, since I prayed with all my, remember in the scripture, who's the first person that got to see Jesus? It wasn't any of the disciples. It was a woman. And why was she first? Because the scripture doesn't lie, and also she created a doorway. She created a doorway because she sought the Lord with all her heart. In the Bible, you know, the heart is the thing that, which I'm going to talk about next, is really, see, in Genesis, sin is what got put into our heart. So, and that's what Satan's always trying to put in our heart, is not just sin, but just anything from the world, from worry to cares to this or that. He's trying to impute that in the heart to try to create a veil, right? Because in Genesis there was no veil. It was an open heaven, and I have a revelation that there was no time in the Garden of Eden. And that's why it looks like everybody that reads the Bible, oh, we've only been here for 6,000 years. No, the people's been on the earth for a long time, I believe. This is just my personal belief, because because I had this revelation of time. And then Tony Kemp had a revelation of time. He said when Moses went up to God, if you look at one of Tony Kemp's videos, you'll see that time was suspended when Moses was up in the mountain with God. And it makes perfect sense. See, that's also the mystery in Genesis. In Genesis, when God came down to earth, there is no time in heaven. Time is a destructive force. Like, everything's changing and everything, people are dying. It's a dimension of space and time. And my theory is how it got created is God took a seed, separated it from himself, a piece of himself, and then anything separated from God is not going to be alive, right? It's going to live. It's going to create a dimension of space and time, because you separate a seed of something with, and if you go in science, you know that it was a little singularity smaller than an atom, and from that little singularity that was smaller from an atom, it was probably just a little tiny piece of God. God separated from himself. And then it created the seed, just like the seed created, was put in Mary. Sometimes and Jesus talks about seeds, and even manna looked like a little seed that we're supposed to eat, right? So, once this little seed, my theory is once it got separated from God, then it created space-time, which isn't a dimension, but in that there was a seed called the Garden of Eden, which was separate from space-time. And that's just what I personally believe. So they were connected to God, and they didn't die. And then the other group of people, he said, be fruitful and multiply. That's why we have the fossil record, I personally believe. Now, God has not told me this. It's just something I started putting the pieces together, saw different pieces from my revelation when I was praying 40 years ago, and time slowed down. And I thought, well, maybe that's what you just feel when you pray. But as soon as I was praying again, and someone that wasn't a Christian was next to me in the car, and he was driving, and I was praying, and I connected real powerful to God. Time really slowed down this time. And the guy that wasn't saved next to me, didn't know I was praying, he all of a sudden was like freaking out because time is slowing down. And what's interesting is he knew that it was time slowing down. But that's the way revelation is when you have a near-death experience. You have instant understanding of things, which doesn't make sense to most people, but that's how it works. So he instantly knew that it was time slowing down. How in the world did he know that? I don't know. That's what the first thing I thought when I experienced it. So as soon as he panicked and looked over at me, I knew I was praying. I knew why it felt like. I just thought it felt like time. I didn't know time was actually slowing down. But he confirmed it to me, and I didn't even think anything about it until about 30 years later, 35 years later. Then I saw a near-death experience of a guy that, and I just kept hearing time and time again that there's no time in heaven. So that Adam and Eve, if you know anything about how spiritual things work, you know for a fact that since they were connected to God, that garden where they were did not have time. It couldn't have had time. And I wasn't planning on talking about this, but it makes perfect sense why you have a fossil record of all these people living and dying, and then the two merge. Then in the Bible it says the sons of God saw the daughters of men. And as soon as that joining occurred, God cut the lifespan down to 120 years. And also I think it produced giants or something. But these were the people that were not having children, Adam and Eve. They were more like angels. They lived connected to the kingdom, but then they got demoted, and then they became more like men, right? They were still called the sons of God, and they were living like 1,000 years. Then all of a sudden they got cut down to 120 years when they started mixing. Remember the Bible says, "Be ye separate." So once they started mixing with the daughters of men, you see an instant stealing of what life? They got cut down to 120 years. And I didn't know I was going to talk about this, but this fundamental understanding came from that revelation. And Tony Kemp went into heaven, and he saw a book, and he was looking at the book. It said that when Moses went up to meet God, time was suspended. So when I saw that, it was just more confirmation of already what I knew. And so anyway, I was talking about door openers. In the Garden of Eden, they found Satan's word, right? And that was a doorway, right? See, people know that Jesus is a door, but Satan's also a doorway. And so after they went through that doorway of his word, Satan's word, when they abided in that word, it produced a fruit, which was death. It produced all these fruits that we have to deal with today, from worry and fear. See, they didn't have worry, they didn't have fear. That's why Jesus says to enter into the kingdom of God. That's why Jesus says to enter into the kingdom of God, you must become like a little child, right? Because you're actually entering into a spiritual atmosphere, mentality that existed in Genesis, right? Because I'm thoroughly convinced in Genesis they didn't even know what worry was. They didn't know what fear was. That was not introduced till Satan brought all of that, not only death but a total change, and then to keep us in that state, Satan had us have the knowledge of good and evil, and then there's something else Satan put in us, which is the secret of sin. I'm not going to reveal what that is. But that, you combine those two things together, and you got one screwed up individuals. You got a person. I'll say this much: you have a ground. Remember, Jesus said that the heart is ground. Well, when you combined everything that I know that happened in Genesis, and you put that in the heart, you've created a ground that can receive satanic seed. And this satanic seed is really the blockage that blocks us, that creates that veil so that we don't have an open heaven. I really think, for example, Enoch walked with God, and then he was taken. Of course he was taken. He walked into what he was walking in. He walked out of that veil of all that stuff that Satan brought in Genesis. So when I see what Anna's doing here is God put her in a place to separate her mind. Like in church, it's a distraction, right? In church, you have a distraction. You're thinking about what people think. You're thinking about this. You're thinking about that. It can be a distraction if your mind. That's why in the Old Testament, or in the back in the scribes and Pharisees, they had a prayer shawl where they totally covered themselves. And if you go to the Azusa Street miracles, if you go to the Azusa Street miracles, you will see a man who sat in church, and the man put a box over his head. He put a box right over his head. Talk about strange. But in the Azusa Street, where people's arms would grow out and different things, the minister would put a box over his head and sit there and pray. But all he was really doing was connecting. He was putting himself in a place where he could connect, open the doorway to get rid of all that noise. It's just like trying to tune into a radio station with God. You have to get on the right frequency, right? And the Bible even talks about that. For example, the Bible in the Lord's Prayer says, "Forgive those that." It says to be forgiven, but it also says to forgive others. So this forgiveness of others, all of this garbage that's unlike the Father, all this garbage that can get into us, just like garbage could get in the ground. All this stuff in the ground, like rocks, like if you're a farmer and you got ground, you don't want a bunch of rocks. You want stuff in there that's going to make something grow, right? The seed and the word of God to grow. And so basically, what I see here is it's just something that opened the door. And see, I believe this. Anyone could do this at any time. What Anna's doing, if they get in the right spiritual place. For example, when Jesus, after Jesus was coming back on the 40 days he was here after the resurrection, you would see him giving a hint and a clue of how he manifests himself. See, people think that Jesus isn't there all the time. Like in a church service, people think that if two or more are gathered together, he has a promise that he's be in the midst. Just like that promise that the first woman who saw Jesus after the resurrection, she sought God with all her heart. And the Bible, of course, doesn't lie. If you do that, then you break through. You break through all the veil, because your heart is the thing that blocks you. Your heart can get filled with so many different things instantly. Like your thought processes are so fast. I mean, if you're a sensitive person like me or some women, and so I've always been a very sensitive person. I can have in a minute's time, how they say when people have near-death experiences, in a few seconds they see their entire life review. Well, people like me, I can think about so many things in a small amount of time that I can think about so many different things in a matter of 30 seconds or even a matter of a minute, that it's just a lot of stuff, a lot of information, a lot of sensitivity. So that's a lot of stuff blocking. Now, if it's good stuff, if it's remember God said to Martha, he said, Martha, Martha, thou art careful and troubled about many things. But Mary has chosen that good thing. So it's really about choosing. Like there was this woman called Carrie Fisher, and her mind was so messed up. I mean, so many demonic strongholds and thoughts and things where Satan had penetrated and got into her mind that she had to get electric shock therapy and get her mind shocked just so she could function, because she had to let go of all that stuff that she wanted to control. She wanted to control stuff. And remember, David says, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. And remember, Jesus said you have to become like little children. But she got so, she was grabbing on hold so many things. The only way she could function, they had to shock her and erased all those memories. Talk about Satan having domination over somebody's mind. But that's what we lean. That's what Satan created in Genesis. All this fear, all this worry, and that's a blockage to the open heaven of what they had in Genesis. That's why New Age is Satan is introduced into New Age. All of this stuff to give them power and to rejuvenate their existing spirit without the born again spirit. For example, he's got this. Satan is bringing in all this stuff that came from, and some of the stuff, there's nothing wrong with it in a sense. It's good thinking, but it's separated from the Bible, which is an antichrist type system, belief system, because they're rejuvenating the old spirit, but they're not getting the born again spirit. But there is power in rejuvenating the old spirit, as far as getting all that clutter out of there. So they're doing things like meditation, and there's nothing wrong with meditation, clearing your mind. You can hear God better if you clear out all that garbage. If you're a Christian, there ain't nothing wrong with that. But what they're doing is they're using it as a power. But scientists use powers. They find truths and they use powers. So I don't want to condemn it as far as that goes. But I condemn it in the fact that they're using it as a religion. Like science almost turns into a religion too when they start not believing in God. They find scientific truths, and then it almost becomes like a religion where they become an atheist. So that's when it goes into danger zone, when they start doing that. And that's kind of the spirituality that they've got from this new age type thinking, which there's nothing wrong with some of the stuff they're thinking as far as the truths they're finding. And that's how Satan's creating this counterfeit, is because he has to use truths and he has to make it close to the truth as possible, yet not have the truth there. So he's giving powers as far as living in the now moment, because if you live in the now moment, you release yourself from all the clutter that Satan brings as far as fear, worry, and anxiety, stressing on stuff on a psychological level. You're kind of doing what Jesus said, to be like little children, and a lot of them are becoming like that. They're even turning to love, because they found out if they walk in love, they're free. And on the spiritual realm, I'm not really exactly sure what's happening there. I'm sure there's some demonic spirits that are leading them in some ways by giving them this wisdomful truth. And like I said, there's, it can backfire on them. What Satan's doing can actually backfire, because if he teaches them to walk in a good spirit, that's what Christians are also supposed to do. Walk in the right spiritual things, atmospheres. And if he teaches them that, and they find Jesus, and they find out that Jesus, then he's kind of really hurt himself there. But that's kind of what's going on there. But I don't know why I'm talking about all that. But going back to the doorway, of what Anna just did here is, I mean, I had a doorway open experience a few years back, or quite a few years back, where Paula White was speaking about something on TV, and somebody told her something that she had done in her ministry that really helped her. And as soon as they told her that, a wave of faith went over her. And then as that wave of faith went over her and enhanced her faith, then she spoke. And as soon as she spoke, then the manifest presence of God in the room, which was kind of weighty as far as what Anna's talking about here. And but as far as having an experience like Anna, I didn't have an experience that time. I wasn't in a good spiritual place. Probably if I was in a better spiritual place, maybe something would have happened. But that's another story. But I've struggled, to be honest. I was in bondage in my mind for 40 years. And, I mean, very powerful bondage. Didn't even know it. Didn't even know what was going on. Just total domination. I couldn't even pray. It was just so totally dominated. And, I guess on the medical realm, they call it attention deficit disorder. But I've had about 10 years of instruction on the mind and how all this stuff works, and God gave me the gift of understanding, so which helps me understand all the little details of how all this stuff works. And that's why I'm making this video, because I saw some interesting stuff here that I wanted to also explain. So Anna got a doorway open. She got the veil of all that crazy spirit. And see, that's a spiritual atmosphere that didn't exist in Genesis. You know, that Satan can dwell in. Satan's goal is to get us. He changed the heart of our ground in Genesis so that he could infiltrate us like a Trojan horse. It's all about infiltrating us with thoughts and worries and fears, because then once you have a belief system, a word per se, in which you're whether being dominated and agreeing with that word, or whether just agreeing with that word like Eve did, there's no difference. See, a dominating spirit just makes you agree with a word, like let's say a person gets depressed, or a person gets feeling negative or down. They've probably made some sort of choice that they weren't aware of that agreed with that spirit. That's why there's so much talk nowadays about prophesying, speaking and prophesying, because then you agree with that word, right? So what happens on a psychological level is that people are agreeing with stuff, but they're not aware that they're agreeing with it. And that's the whole goal of Satan, is to get you to agree with, sorry, I got this guy on this other channel that's fishing, that just caught this fish live, and I don't want to sit there and be distracted by it. but that's the goal. See, how much time have I? Oh, I got plenty of time still. Almost distracted me. But I mean, that's the whole goal, is to create a separation between us and God. And then once you have that mental domination, then next thing after you that what happened to me is I had such a powerful mental domination. No Christians know about this kind of stuff hardly. As far as like taking a mental diagnosis and putting a spiritual, like if you mentally diagnose me, you would call it severe attention deficit disorder. If you put a mental diagnosis on a spiritual manifestation, that's basically what I had. And it's interesting. It's more than just mental. It's also a physical domination. But I don't want to get into all of that. There's a physical thing that helps create the mental also. I'll just touch on it real quick. It deals with this thing called leaky gut. And Jesus talked about this also. He talked about, you must eat me and you must drink my blood. This ties in both mental and physical. Like leaky gut, basically, they found that, I think, it creates hundreds of different diseases that people don't even realize. It's all from eating. Because see, when you eat something, and this ties into a spiritual connotation also, but when you eat something, remember Jesus said you must eat you must eat me and drink my blood. Well, and of course he was talking about his word and then his spirit, because when Anna got through this doorway, how'd she get through this doorway? She found something that was really good to eat, spiritually and mentally. She found this woman or somebody, she said, I can't remember exactly what she said, but she found this woman was praying, and it was a door opener. She found something that she ate, just like they ate in the garden, they ate a fruit in the Garden of Eden. She found something that she ate, and it was so pure and so good that it created a doorway, and next thing she knows, she's in heaven, right? She broke the veil. And it was based on something she spiritually ate. Now, tying this into a little bit of I'll touch on just a little bit about this leaky gut stuff. The when you eat something, you have a surface area of about the size of a tennis court. That means on the outside world, we think that we're being exposed to the outside world by our skin. Yes, the sun hits our skin, but for the most part, you're not being penetrated anywhere in your body, other than in two places. The air you breathe in, you're breathing that in, which for the most part we breathe pure good air. For the most part, we're breathing that in. Then the other exposure, which if what we were breathing in was bad, would be make us sick really fast, right? Because we're breathing that in. It's getting inside of us. And if we were breathing in stuff that was bad, we would know fast. Like in caves, they would put, was it canaries? Little birds in the caves, the miners would put in there. And if they saw the canaries dropping over dead, they knew that the air was bad. So if the air is bad, we know it fast. So that's something you're breathing in, right? So when you eat, you have a surface area inside your gut the size of a tennis court. So when you eat, you're introducing the outside world to a surface area of a tennis court. And see, what people don't understand about thinking, remember I said you have, some people think you can have 70,000 thoughts in a day. Now, thought is either something that's emanating from inside of you or coming from the outside in, but it doesn't make any difference because Satan already planted the Trojan horse on the inside, so you would have those thoughts anyway. So a thought is something that's entering into you, right? And so it's a word. Any thought is a word, right? And that's entering into you. And Solomon made a great statement. Solomon said, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. Then God made a statement to Moses, revealing his nature and his character. And God said to Moses, I am what I am. And then, of course, Jesus then goes and says, you must eat me and drink me, which is kind of a clue of transformation, right? So Anna finds something good to eat here, and it opens up it opens up a doorway. It cuts the veil open. Next thing that happens, Anna's in heaven, right? But there's something that happened before that. And as far as this eating thing I'm talking about, the diseases happen because your blood is a pure, holy thing, right? Your blood. You don't want bacteria in your blood, but yet in your gut you have, some people think it's 40 trillion bacteria. Other people think it's 10 times that amount. That's how much bacteria you got in your gut. So your gut's got to have an immune system right there to, number one, keep that out. But then that bacteria helps digest our food. Then you have, so if this lining of this gut gets broken down, then stuff can enter in, and once it enters in, something that was supposed to be good for you is identified as bad, then your system attacks it, causes autoimmune problems, you get arthritis, you get all these different diseases, and then what's really interesting is your antibodies have a thing called memory. And remember I said that Carrie Fisher had to get electric shock therapy to remove these memories so that she could have a clear mind. See how all this just kind of all ties together, the physical and the spiritual and all the different things? But I don't want to go down that road. I just kind of wanted to show how it's interesting how all this connects together. And in Genesis, they ate something, and how mentally we're always eating something. We're always thinking about something. So that's entering into you is what I'm basically saying. It's entering into you. So Anna ate something that entered into her, and then it created a doorway. And what is Jesus? Jesus, he's the Word, right? She found it a pure word from somebody. Created a doorway, and then that brought what she says, and this is what the revelation I had while the reason I record this video. I wasn't even going to talk about this other stuff. But she had something that she described as a weighty blanket. Now, me working in the medical field 20 years, I saw something using that knowledge and the knowledge of something else God spoke to me, which I think I'm forgetting about. But I put it together how it works. You know, having the gift of understanding and just having a little bit of medical knowledge. And what I saw is this. Oh, now I see something else that I almost forgot I wasn't going to throw in. For example, most people, like if you go underwater, there's a pressure, right? The deeper you go underwater, there's a pressure, right? If you got at the bottom of the ocean, there's a pressure so powerful. When they get down with these submarines, they put glass in that's like so thick, and they're hoping it doesn't break. Like in the movie Titanic, you see the guy kind of joking, saying, if this glass breaks, we're dead in a microsecond. But what happened here is when this pressure, this weighty blanket of the Lord fell on Anna, you see, also there's oxygen. Even though you can't see the oxygen like water, it's a pressure. And it presses down, and that's what actually presses the air. Like in your lungs, you have bloodstream and you have tissue. And here's the tissue, the bloodstream's right next to it, and the tissue's so thin that the air pressure from all the molecules pushing down, just like water pressure, is actually what pushes the oxygen into the bloodstream. and then you have a pressure of CO2, which is in your bloodstream, which moves the other way. So when I heard Anna talking about this blanket pressing down on her, what was it doing? It was busting the veil of all the things in life. You live a life, and all the little frustrations from the small little things that creep into your mind to all these distractions from, I mean, she has children. I can't even imagine having children. Of all the worries and feelings and emotions and thoughts that a person would have, which is a spiritual atmosphere of pressure, right? Just to describe it that way. It's a spiritual pressure. It's the pressure of living in this world that's different from Adam and Eve's world, where there was zero worry. There was no such thing as worry. There was no such thing as fear. Wasn't even no such thing as a lie. Imagine living in a world where nobody lied. Imagine that. Where nobody deceived themselves, where nobody did evil of any kind. No evil. That's why John Lennon sings this song, imagine all the people. And see, it's probably to John Lennon, probably religion represented bondage, and in some ways it is. Because you go in churches and you get all these... See, I was going to write a book called Spiritual DNA. See, Satan makes his DNA look like... to pass it off in the church, he has to make it look like it's God's DNA. Because every word is either life or death, right? On a spiritual DNA level. And you can even read a word in the Bible and turn it into a spiritual DNA against you. Satan can actually take a real word that you read in the Bible, and he can actually take that word and put a belief system on it to create a spiritual DNA to kill, steal, and destroy. If the person's belief system of that word is wrong, right? But in the church, you got all these people with, and there's plenty of churches out there. I haven't been to a whole lot of good churches in my life. But in a lot of the churches that aren't prospering, it's because of the spiritual, basically because of the spiritual DNA. And it's the same for a human Christian. If a Christian is not prospering, it's because they're being penetrated by spiritual DNA that it is what it is. It is what it is. And that's the battle that we have in this world. It was the DNA of Satan didn't exist in Genesis. There was no lie, no fear. So John Lennon sings a song, "Imagine all the people," and all. I forget the words of the song and all that stuff. But basically, I'd have to listen to the song again. But basically, he's wanting a place. He's probably senses the spiritual DNA of some of the evil stuff. And see, that's when people just say that religion's evil and Christianity's evil, and they just want to throw it all. They want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, because the bathwater's dirty, the atmosphere's dirty, and they just want to throw the baby Jesus out with the bathwater. And that's what happens, because the church gets so sick. I mean, it was so sick when Jesus came the first time that the scribes and Pharisees murdered him, that type of mentality. But that's just a spiritual DNA, and I don't want to get too deep into all that stuff. And Satan puts it in there that he turns it into, it's really religion. What Cain started creating the first religion, God nipped it in the bud just like that. But Cain started creating a religion. It was a way that he thought was right. But he wasn't perceiving the truth. It was Abel that was pure perceived the truth, sacrificed a lamb which represented Christ. Or I think that's what he did. I don't know. I have to read it again. But obviously he wasn't perceiving the truth. And then you see him really not perceiving the truth when he judged his brother wrongly and then murdered him. And but I'm kind of getting off track. Let's go back to this doorway. So she got this pure word. It opened up a doorway. It was pure enough to totally fill her heart, press out all of that thinking that exists in the world, that this realm that we live in that just isn't like the Garden of Eden, pressed all that out, and it opened up the doorway, and the next thing you know, she's in heaven. But I wanted to talk about the pressure thing. What is the weighty blanket doing? Just like the pressure of oxygen that presses, the oxygen presses oxygen into your lungs. We live in a realm of 21% oxygen. So if let's say somebody gets sick, they get carbon monoxide poisoning. Believe it or not, carbon monoxide will stick to your hemoglobin. I think it's 100 times more easy than oxygen will. Ain't that crazy? That something that's bad for you will stick to your oxygen and bind to your hemoglobin, which is where the oxygen's carried, 100 times greater than an oxygen will. So what they do to fix a person like that, they put them in a hyperbaric chamber and they increase the pressure. And then it's able to drive the oxygen and replace the carbon monoxide out of the hemoglobin, the blood, right? So I think our spiritual blood, our spirit, which represents the blood and which flows in us, we're always being penetrated by the pressure of this realm. We're always being penetrated by the pressures of this realm. And some people live in that realm. Like he said to Martha, 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 thou art careful and troubled about many things. So what is Martha doing? Martha's entering into something by choice. Just like Carrie Fisher. Remember Carrie Fisher? I said had to get electric shock therapy. So Mary was seeking the kingdom of God. And Jesus said that's not going to be taken away from her. No, it's not going to be taken away from her. But she's made the right choice. But choosing all these other things, that seem important, is where people get stuck. And that's a worldly pressure that Satan created, this atmosphere that we live in. I mean, I'm getting ready to go to work, and on a psychological level, when I go into work today, on a spiritual level, if you've ever seen that movie, in the movie Private Ryan, where the first scene where they go in and there's all these explosions going off, and everyone, the Germans are just shooting as they're getting out of the ship. They're just shooting them dead before they can get out of the ship. On a spiritual level, my job that I'm getting ready to go into today, it feels like that. On a psychological level, to me, when I go into work, there's so much satanic, divisive, systemal, atmospheric stuff there that it's like I'm going into a war zone. And people have machine guns and they're just shooting at me and bombs are dropping. I mean, that's how it feels to me. Because it's so volatile. The people are under pressure. I can't describe what I do because there's a person that stalks me on the internet. So I can't tell what I do, but it's amazing how Satan can set these jobs up. But that's how it feels. It feels like on a spiritual level, that's the kind of attack that I'm under at work. It's just, it's just unreal. And then you're under so much pressure. It's hard to be nice to people because you've been put in a position by your job. The job I have right now, I used to work in the medical field, and it was a tough job with life and death situations and things of that nature as a respiratory therapist. It was a tough job, especially for someone like me that was so sensitive. But I mean, this job, these jobs that they put out there where you only make, like I did, I'm close to drawing Social Security. It's not hardly enough to live, but it'll be enough to get out of the rat race. But it's an Egypt type job, Satan tries to keep you down. And unfortunately, when you're in these type of jobs, like for example, look at Moses. When you're in these high pressure Egypt type jobs, Moses murdered somebody. That's how you feel in these jobs. These jobs where Satan has you in such bondage in a job. And I'm close to getting delivered out of it. After today, I only got 18 more weeks. And I can quit this job and get a better job. But right now, I'm locked into it, kind of. Of course, if I use my faith, I could deliver myself. But as far as what's going to happen today, let's just worry about what's going to happen today. I'm going into that job, and I need to get off here and pray. So I need to do that because I don't want to go into that job without praying. Because it's created. It's a satanic creation. In the Bible, or not in the Bible, but a guy named Henry Groover talks about innocent blood. Well, blood can be shed without killing you. You don't have to be killed for your blood to be shed. Like Anna was talking about when she went in there and she was like, well, I'm the only woman here. And it made her feel good because of maybe the men out there that, maybe made a woman feel like she's not worthy to be in ministry or prophet or whatever. That mentality, is a force that attacks, right? And I forgot even what I was going to say. Yeah, I just went blank. But basically, let's go back to the pressure thing. The blanket just pressed all of that stuff that's in this world, this atmosphere of all the systems. Like I was talking about a system that was created at my job. And it all stems from greed. I'm in a job where I'm only making like $12 an hour, but I have the pressure of somebody that I have more pressure than the CEO of the company in a sense, which isn't right, But that's what they do. When you work for a contract company, you're the stepchild, and they're going to milk you for everything they can because they always know they can put another contract company in there. So they take advantage, and it's just greed, and all of those systems. And then they get selfish. They don't see things from your perspective at all. They don't care. And then if you snap in that situation, which happened to me about a year prior. Satan created that job that I had a year prior, and I finally snapped, and I was ready to quit the job. I was just ready to walk out. And even when I was at the place of trying to walk out, with all the pressure, see, pressure can lead you to sin, which it drove me into sin at that time, which, that's a long story. I mean, I don't want to get into all of it here, but that's the goal, is to break you down, you know. And if when you let stuff get on top of you, like Satan he will dominate you, like in Egypt, like when Moses just murdered a man. And that's how Israel got in Egypt in the first place, because they murdered a tribe. That's how they ended up in bondage in the first place. They self-righteously, just like when they self-righteously murdered Jesus. They thought it was the right thing to do. They got his self-righteousness, and they slept with the prince of the land slept with their daughter, and then they thought it was their right to murder these people. And they did, and Moses, being Moses, murdered someone. And but that's how Satan plays these games, you know. Satan put, like in a Moses situation, once he gets domination over you, then you're in this physical realm where things are just unfair, and you're trying to get out. You're trying to rise up a deliverer, and then Satan strikes that down by having someone do evil, like probably the Egyptian that day that Moses killed was probably just downright being abusive. I mean, and Moses rose up and defended that. And his defense was to murder that person. But what Moses didn't understand is that Satan had legal right to do that. He literally did. He had legal right. And that's even in Job, he had legal right to do what happened to Job. As far as see, these are extremes that are in the Bible. Just because you see it in the Bible doesn't mean that's going to happen to you, because God uses these extremes, like from people being stoned to the Job. These are extremes that people paid a price to teach us something. And God's far more lenient than, way far more lenient. Like when Jesus came, he didn't have the woman stoned. God's way more lenient about things. But what the message behind all that is, there is a breaking point where when Satan has enough evidence against us that God has to allow him to kill, steal, and destroy. He has to allow it. Because when Satan finally, Jesus being our lawyer, keeps trying to keep this verdict from being passed, but if Satan gets enough evidence, then kill, stealing, and destroy is going to happen. You're going to end up in Egypt for so many, for 400 years. I mean, if you murder, that's a big one with God, murder, killing innocent blood. That's why the United States is in big trouble with all the abortions, murdering in the innocent blood. That's why this virus is rising up. That's why different things are happening, is because Satan has legal right. He has legal right to do these things. And probably what's going to happen is the right has got so crazy. They're almost like Paul in the Bible, that thought he had the right to murder. Or I mean, the left. I think the left is going to get so crazy that they're just going to step over the line and expose themselves. And because I used to be a Democrat, as far as that goes. Now I don't even know what I am. I'm for Trump because I know God's using him, even though I know he's not perfect. And we got to pray to put him in the right place, which even this evil can be used to put him in the right place. make him seek God greater. With all this pressure, pressure can be also turn you toward God. But anyway, the weighty blanket. The reason I recorded this the whole thing, and I gotta quit here real quick. Was this? It created this pressure, and it pressed out all of the atmosphere of this world. It pressed out all of everything that we infiltrated from this world, all the thoughts, all the things. Like, I'm going to go into work and it's going to be like it's going to be like I mean, it feels just like, to me, on a mental, spiritual level, an assault like they had on the beach in the movie Private Ryan. I mean, it just feels that way to me, with all the assault that goes on, and me running for my life, trying to keep up on this job. Heck, I almost even had a heart attack one day out there when I was first doing it. But but I cried out to God, and He sent a deliverer, and somebody came out and helped me, and I didn't have a heart attack that day. But to me, I've been through so much that, a heart attack is just it ain't that bad compared to everything else that I've been through. But that's all because Satan got me down on a psychological level. Finally turned to sin. Satan had legal right. I mean, just like he had legal right in Egypt. When Moses rose up and killed that person, I can feel that way at work with some of the things people do. I can feel that way when people are insensitive. I'm out there killing myself, trying to do the best I can do in a horrible situation, and people are just insensitive, and it's tough. It's really tough, but I know how to get myself out of all this. Number one, I can't be like Moses. I can't give Satan any more legal ground. I can't lose my cool. I can't fold under the pressure. I've got to do what James says, to wear the breastplate of righteousness, and you got to stand in the evil day. That's the only way you can get out of this stuff. Now, yeah, you can get other things can happen. But deliver yourself, instead of having the 40 years like Moses in the wilderness for 40 years type deal, if you can stand for 40 days, and then you can get yourself out. I mean, Moses would have been a deliverer if he wouldn't have sinned. He could have had revelation there in Egypt, but he sinned. He murdered a person. And that's the reality of where people really are at. These are the powerful things that people are under, especially that live in these atmospheric places, like Kevin or Henry Groover would go and pray, like in places in Skid Row, and he could hear the blood crying out, innocent blood. And in those places, somehow Satan has legal right. I have to listen to more to Henry Groover stuff. But somehow Henry Groover would go in these places and somehow break down the legal right that Satan had by like being like a high priest and forgiving their sins. I'm not sure exactly what Henry was doing. I know it has something to do with that. But somehow he would forgive their sins, and it would break the yoke of Satan's legal right in those areas, and it could transform that area that Satan had legal right to have powers in and to do evil in, because of the innocent blood that was shed. So I need to research that stuff more and really get an understanding of it, because it's a very powerful Christian thing, is forgiving, being a high priest and forgiving people's sins. And I'd like to study more on that, because it's a very powerful breakthrough type stuff. I guess I need to do it before I go into work. I need to be a high priest for these people that created this atmosphere and all this stuff. I definitely need to plead the blood. But so this pressure pushed all that stuff out of Anna, just like oxygen pressure in a hyperbaric chamber. It pressed that stuff out of her and purified her heart. And then next thing she knows, she's just like Enoch, she was taken. Once the heart was purified. And if you're a sensitive person like me, it's amazing. I see Anna where she's lost a lot of that sensitivity from things she's been through, which, but if you're a sensitive person, it's easy to be infiltrated with things because you're sensitive, right? But so the revelation I saw when she talked about the blanket pressing down on her, I realized that's what that was. That was God's atmosphere, because there's an atmosphere that we don't, like if you get into one of the best church services where the atmosphere is of heaven, that's probably more of like it was in the Garden of Eden, right? But unfortunately, due to what I was talking about, where all this evil's been done, where Henry Groover would go and he would hear the blood, he would hear the innocent blood, just like Abel. God could hear it, and he said, well, Abel's blood crieth out to me. So when this, all these, and see, blood can be spilled not just when a person's murdered, but like when I go into work, people's going to spill my blood. People are going to be rude to me, like when Jesus was crucified, he said, Father, forgive them for they know not what they do. But we can be crucified at work, where people are spilling our blood, whipping us left and right, and just drawing blood, but not killing us, right? And that's what's going to happen when I go into work today. Possibly, maybe I'll have a good day. Last 2 days were I got ripped by a good one. I had a good day, all hell broke loose, but on a spiritual level, I was in a sound place the first day. But then as soon as I left work, I was about ready to leave work, and I thought, wow, this wasn't a bad day. Even though all hell broke loose, I kept myself in a good spiritual place. Then one of my bosses, just right as I was, I thought, well, I'm home free this day. Nothing, no drama happened. I kept my cool. Right as I was about ready to leave, a boss rose up and just ripped me for something. He ripped me, a good one. And he did it, I understand on a spiritual level why he did it. He did it because he was feeling insecure like the German people felt after World War I, why Hitler's word was able to infiltrate them, because they were insecure. So they were wanting to grab for something to make them feel better for themselves. So the way this guy made him feel better for myself is to rip me for some little small thing that I was powerless not to control. I had no choice. And Satan knew it, and he ripped me with that. And it was to make him feel better about himself, because he had done something stupid where he's a supervisor, where he really did something stupid. So he did it to make him feel better. And I saw that afterward, but Satan used him and got me right before I left. And he actually got me where he made me rise up and get a little aggressive with the guy, and even threatened to quit my job. But everybody's got a limit, I got my limit. And I told God, that I got a limit here on this one. I said if they push me on this one, but I need to keep my cool. And I almost crossed the line with this guy, where I got a little aggressive with him. And I almost escalated it. But which that's what Satan wants. He has to have something legal to nail you. I mean, he's got to have something. Got to find something. So anyway, this blanket, the atmosphere of heaven basically pushed out the atmosphere that exists on this earth. And once she was filled with that, then she was taken just like Enoch to heaven from that pressure. And that's, in a sense, that's what revival is. It's an atmospheric pressure of heaven pressing through, because hell is always trying to press through. Satan's got his hands in everything. He's got his sin in us, because Jesus said none are good. Even as a Christian, we have that seed in us that Satan wants to rise up. That's why it says in Genesis there's two seeds. But the one seed, why Satan fears us, is because the new seed that comes from the Holy Spirit, the information that comes from him, is more powerful than his seed, just like Anna superseded the atmosphere and shifted into heaven and got revelation, which is really what the goal of Christianity, for us to shift into more and more, basically. Because we've lived in this realm for so long. We're like fish that lived in a cave. Fish that live in a cave for so long lose their eyesight. Even fish that they put they start farming these fish, and they notice that the fish started losing their hearing after about 2 or 3 generations of the farming these fish, because they didn't have to worry about predators, so they started losing their hearing. So that's what I'm seeing when this weighty pressure came. I'm seeing a doorway that brought it, and I'm also seeing the pressure, atmosphere, presence of God that was in Genesis just pressed through Anna's spirit, and then shifted her into this heavenly encounter. So that's why in the Bible, and I'll close with this, that's why you see a heavenly encounter after Jesus was, I'll close with this, that's why you see a heavenly encounter of Jesus manifesting and appearing, and them, they didn't know it was Jesus, but it was, and finally he did reveal himself. That's where the age that we're in now. So what brought forth Jesus in this encounter after the 40 days after he walked on the earth after the resurrection and appeared from time to time to the disciples? That's the kind of the realm we're in now. And what brought that forth? Two people were talking about Jesus. As they walked in the way, that they were talking about him, right? And focusing on him. And as they focused on him, then the next thing they know, he's walking with them. Because remember, he made the promise. And see, this is also a faith promise. A door that Jesus put there as a word, as an actual portal, per se. He said, where two or more are gathered together in his name, I'm in the midst. So what this is him telling how to access him. Remember, he said to one of the disciples, you know the way. Well, this is the secret. Because the reverse secret is Satan's trying to open up his portal. Ooh, Satan don't like that one. Satan don't like this word right here. I can feel him getting angry. Satan just got mad. His spirit just got mad. I felt it. He's getting mad. Satan does the reverse. He puts forth his word in the earth and is trying to create a portal into us so that to block the doorway. So he's trying to do the reverse. That's why he created all this and this fallen realm and the atmosphere and everything that's going on here, is to penetrate us with that pressure, to shift us. Remember when as they waxed worse and worse, and then finally God destroyed them with a flood. His goal is to wax our heart and get it sicker and sicker and sicker and sicker and sicker. And that's what he's always doing. He's doing the reverse, which is a transformation. But he doesn't want us to know about these doorways. So the doorway is the promise that if two or more are gathered together in his name, that Jesus is in the midst. That means he's just as real in the midst. And our perceptions that we don't, because of the veil of what Satan has drug in, gets in us, that we don't realize that that's the truth, because we don't perceive it, right? But of course, a seer like Anna will see this stuff, but she's probably not seeing it until she shifts and pushes in it, even though it's a reality all the time, whether she sees it or not. It's a reality based on the word, based on the promise. The promise says that if two or more are gathered together in his name, he is in the midst. Now they're going to bring that him there by believing that promise. And see, that can break through. Just that alone is enough to break through to manifest Jesus' presence in a very real way. I mean, I believe it's just as, to me, I believe it can be just as real as when they were walking with him back then. I truly believe a person can walk with Jesus as real as they walked with him, with the disciples walked with him when he was alive on the earth. That's what I believe. I believe in my heart that is true, that anyone can attain that. And that you can walk with Jesus as real as when they walked with him, as the disciples walked with him. I truly see that as a possibility. And it's a choice, like he said. He said, Martha, Martha, thou art careful and troubled about many things. So it's a choice of how you walk. And you walking and thinking is very similar. Because a thought is a word, right? So that's just what I want to throw out here. When the thought that's coming to my mind right now is a person digs for gold, right? They have to, what is it that remember Jesus said the heart is ground? Where's the gold at? It's not on the surface usually. You got to dig for it, right? There's a lot of dirt, right? So that's how I see Christianity. To get to the gold, you got to dig. You got to dig. And we're always digging in a direction. We're always after some sort of gold, you know. We're always seeking something, right? And Jesus compared that to money, right? Your heart is always, it's always seeking after something. It always is. We always looking for something, and a person can, it doesn't matter who you are. The first person that saw Jesus was not a man, it was a woman. And that makes perfect sense because Satan tempted the woman, and Jesus was brought forth by a woman. But anyway, I guess I'm going to close on that. I can't think of anything else to say, so got to get ready for work. Yeah, I got to get off here, so I'm going to jump off. But I think that was an interesting message. Very interesting message.